get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Veronica Wilson, and I think we all know each other here, but for the YouTube, I am the program administrator for Adult and Aging Services, and I oversee the Continuum of Care. Usually this meeting is led by Aya Moran, one of our HMIS administrators, but she is out sick today. So you got me and Amy. Paul Schmidt, do you know everybody, or should we do introductions? Because I'm not sure if you know.
So I recognize a lot of names, but I also send out a lot of emails. So that's probably why. I'm perfectly willing to do introductions for people who don't know me.
So let's go ahead and do introductions. Since you're unmuted, go ahead.
Paul Schmitz. I work for Nutmeg Consulting. We're contracted by the County of Mendocino to be the coordinated entry list manager, but it's a little bit more than that. We do a whole bunch of stuff, and when needed, I help out with some HMIS stuff because I have a lot of experience with Service Point. So that is me.
Amy, I'm going to jump to you and then Dan.
So, hi everybody, I'm Amy, and I am one of the HMIS students.
I'm Dan McIntyre. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for RCHDC, and I'm also the co-chair of the COC.
And then Shanna.
Hello, I'm Shanna Drake. I am a Senior Housing Program Specialist here at CDC, and I'm a co-chair. I believe so.
Of the Coordinated Entry Committee.
Yes, yes.
Excellent. Had to think about that one. Paul Davis.
Hi, I'm Paul. I'm the Executive Director of the Mendocino Coast Hospitality Center in Fort Bragg.
And I'm just following my screen. Nick.
Nicholas Kennedy, Geo Reentry, Program Manager, and then Chair of the Children's Solutions Committee for the COC.
And Drew. That's a super cute top.
Thank you. My name is Drew. I am the Community Support and Housing Programs Director at Fort Street Project.
Excellent. Okay. I think that's everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the agenda. Amy, you guys have it up there?
I'm sorry?
Do you guys have the agenda available where you're at?
Oh, to bring it up on the screen. Sorry.
Yeah. Are you able to do that? Because if not, I can share mine, but I thought it might just be easier if you could do it.
It might be easier for you to share yours.
Okay, you got it.
Because my stuff's loading a little slow still.
Share. That one. Okay, can everybody see that okay? Okay, so my screen's really small and half of it's taken up by this agenda. So if you raise your hand or something, I probably won't be able to see it. So just start talking. So welcome. There are two primary objectives to come out of the meeting, and we want to discuss our meeting frequency. It's kind of been a topic of discussion with all the committees, and we just wanted to revisit that today. And then we want to approve some minor changes to the partner agency HMIS agreement. So those are our two primary purposes of meeting today. I know that Paul Davis is on a limited time today, so I'm going to go out of order in our agenda so that we can address the items that I know that we need. I would like him to weigh in on. So I want to go ahead and jump into the recommended action item, review and approve changes to the partner agency participation, privacy, and data sharing agreement. So bear with me as I scroll down to page 1 of that. So I used the track changes. There were some comments that were saved in there from a previous version that I didn't realize were in there. So it's a little bit smaller, but it is in your packet. And whenever we produce it to bring it to the COC board, if we decide we need to do that, then it'll be a cleaner version. One of the major changes is the title. I was looking for the partner agency participation agreement. And for some reason, the title it didn't say participation, and I didn't realize it was the same document. And so I'm thinking, if I can make that mistake, it's super unclear to the public then. And so working back with Dan and Paul from the last meeting that we had, we went ahead and decided to insert the word participation before privacy and sharing agreement, so it's super clear. I dropped an S from services providers because it's grammatically incorrect. And then at the request of Paul Davis, I added a section here on saying that HMIS lead the county. The contract that the county has as the HMIS lead with the HMIS vendor, which is WellSky, but just in case that changes, we didn't specify the name. But that contract needs to have a business associate agreement attached to it as required by HIPAA. Paul requested this because sometimes they track persons who are enrolled and services for some of their wellness center services. I say stuff, programs. And so by adding this, it can demonstrate in one document and one agreement that the county guarantees that will be included and cover our system. Any questions about that? Any feedback on the language used here? Everybody read it.
I don't have any feedback. I agree with Paul. It needs to be added in there.
Okay, great. Any other feedback?
It looks and sounds good to me.
Okay. And I'm going to scroll down. I think there's one more change.
On page 4.
Yeah, I took out contact information for the HMIS system administrator because our goal is to develop a ticketing system, and this conflicts with that concept. Paul had recommended that we Paul Davis had recommended that we look into having a ticketing system, which is absolutely, that's part of our long-term goals. And so we decided it would be best just to be silent on how to make those reports in this agreement, and then we can work individually based upon what the current climate is with the county and how we're doing it. And so that just gives us that flexibility. And if our email changes, we don't have to change the agreement.
Can you scroll up just a little bit to the beginning of whatever that paragraph was?
Here?
Yeah. So my only concern, that's what I thought it was. I just wanted to make sure. My only concern is that if someone did want to revoke their consent in some manner, having it not clear on how they can do that or who to contact to do that while the ticketing system isn't yet live might be something we want to be mindful of. Like, I don't know if I'm totally not seen this document, use this document or anything. This is all you guys, but I would imagine they should at least have a number to contact to say, hey, I don't want you using my information, or a person.
So the
that
end
can
user
make it
agreement
Uh-huh,
has that information in it.
okay.
And so it would be conveyed in that way. I want to go to the end. If you want, we could add like a section here on how to contact. So instead of it being in the context of the policy language, it would
Yeah.
rather be on the signature page.
Yeah, I mean, just somewhere that someone could call if they needed to. Like, I
Right.
mean, it's not that anyway, somebody should be able to answer the phone or leave a message to something on that, like if they wanted to. That's just my thought.
Yeah.
Could we possibly put right here, immediately contact the HMIS system administrator, and then review your end user agreement for the contact info, like give them a direction to find that information if we don't want to put it specifically right here, or is that just too much?
I kind of see this as I kind of see this as a management document. So, and the elements within here, like from our end, just speaking for the hospitality center, my responsibility is to distill this down to, what my staff need to know and how to do it. And I will do that through, discussions with the county and this committee. And so whatever other documentation that we provide that distills this down is really, to me, what that's for. And I'm kind of with Veronica about not putting too much detail in here, because it means that we have to have this kind of meeting every year, every 6 months to update this with details. That's just my opinion, but
I agree. Having to come to just, erase a sentence. That's why I was just thinking if we gave them like a specific direction to locate that information, we wouldn't have to update that.
right.
All right, I'm gonna show you guys the Word version. See. How's that? And then we'll just add it to the end. I can't see all of it.
Veronica, it might be better to reference an appendix and have an appendix to this, so if the administrator changes, then you don't have to go through and redo all the signature pages, you can just update the appendix.
Oh,
Because if you put the contact information on the signature page and say it changes from the home team or whatever the case may be, then you're gonna be stuck getting these all re-signed again. Or if you just reference it to an appendix, you can update that appendix as that context changes down the line. Or if we implement a ticket system, right, we could just simply put out that ticket system information on that appendix.
okay.
It allows it to be a little more modular. I think that speaks more to what Paul's does too, right? As administrator, I don't know, I would say leaders in the organizations, we dissect that down to the staff into you do step A, B, and C. And they don't need to get into all the details of why, but
Okay. How about I do that?
I
have that changed language. And then I'll add appendix A, like Dan suggests. Okay, great. Okay. So you saw what I was going to change there, and I don't think there's anything else.
That was all that was in there, Veronica.
Yep. So we'll add an appendix A. Any feedback? Any thoughts? Let's go back to the agenda.
Yeah, motion to move this to the main board.
Yep.
I make a motion to approve this and move it to the main board for final approval with the appended changes.
Second.
I'll second.
True.
All third.
So I'm just going to go around and ask you to say yes, no, or abstain. Dan,
Yes.
Shanna,
Yes.
Paul Davis,
Yes.
Nick,
Yes, sorry, I was muted.
thank you, Drew,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So unanimous approval. Paul Schmidt. We're not going to give you guys a vote because it might be weird. Okay, thank you. So I will bring that to the COC board at the June 20-ish meeting, 26th, 24th, something like that, whatever that Monday is.
24th.
Thank you. I think for the time being, we should continue meeting monthly unless anyone has thoughts otherwise. Kind of have a lot going on right now. And we're going to be gearing up to do some more reports come September. So we'll just keep meeting monthly until something we decide otherwise. So we don't need to worry about that. So I want to go ahead and move on to another topic of discussion while we still have Paul Davis with us. And that is law enforcement and HMIS. And so what I want to bring to this committee is we need to discuss and come up with some action items on how our COC wants to address requests from law enforcement agencies to utilize HMIS as a service provider. Fort Bragg Police Department has been operating an emergency winter shelter and has had access to HMIS for entry and exit purposes for that project. It's brought to our attention that a lot of COCs don't allow access to by law enforcement because it's protected personally identifying information. And our privacy policies require that for investigative purposes, we can only disclose certain pieces of information. But what if a law enforcement agency isn't acting in a law enforcement role? How do we deal with that? Where does that fall? Could go on, but I think that maybe it might be good for someone else to speak up.
I'll do. Have you seen this with other agencies, how they deal with it, or no?
So in Chicago, we did not let any law enforcement or any agency with ties to law enforcement into HMIS. If they needed something, which is in like the 4 or 5 years I was there, it was like twice where they would call and ask if a client was in the system. And we'd say, we can't answer that question. And then they would try to, I mean, the law enforcement, so they try to scare you a little bit, but we say you need a warrant. The information in there, if they have access to it, can be used as evidence in any ongoing cases or things like that. And we want to make, in Chicago, we wanted to make sure that clients trusted that their information was safe in the system. If someone says that, yes, they've traded sex for, food, rent, whatever, that could be illegal in whatever jurisdiction you're in, and that could be used against them when they pull up the form. So we really, it was very difficult because we were building a bigger system that would have joint entities kind of in one giant system with medical, penitentiary, all that stuff in one system. And we wound up not moving forward with it because we were having too much trouble with the lawyers trying to protect clients' information. So what Chicago decided ultimately to do was to protect the client's information over any of the law enforcement stuff. So that's how we did in Chicago. It's pretty similar in Connecticut as well. There's no law enforcement that has access. They would have access to, they wouldn't have access to HMIS, but they would have access to like anonymous client data, right? So when we would aggregate things for big studies, they would be part of it, right? But they did not have access.
Did you see in Chicago where police departments directly offers its services like Fort Bragg is trying to do?
Later when COVID started, we were kind of, the idea was to kind of have them help with like street outreach and things. But I don't know how it went after that, because there would have to be some sort of agreement where that any of that information can't be used against them, right? So that would have to be filled out or figured out. And honestly, it's a lawyer thing, right? You're going to have to really get in there, and any kind of law enforcement that's going to have access has to sign a specific agreement so that that information is protected.
I think we take a hard stance of no, Veronica.
Agreed.
It's unfortunate that the city of Fort Bragg wants to pawn off their social responsibility to the police department. It seems to be counterproductive to make our HMIS system productive for those populations that don't like the police to start with. So I think I'm with Paul Schmitz to just kind of follow the Chicago model and just be a hard no. And if, they just have to, I don't think that they're in a manner that they can compartmentalize. And I mean, if we started a legal discussion on how we could compartmentalize for them, that would go on for years before lawyers could agree to it. And I just don't see them agreeing because officers have a certain obligation for certain offenses that are most likely going to show up in these systems, where we as housing providers or service providers look past that. Cops will. So I would suggest we do a hard no. Thank you, but no.
The county has a contract with the city of Fort Bragg for the emergency winter shelter using HAP 3 funding, HAP round 3, and HAP does require that clients served be entered into HMIS.
But then they're going to find somebody else to run the winter shelter.
So the contract language includes that they're required to collect and input that HMIS data into our system, but it doesn't necessarily stipulate what staff has to do that. Their contract includes funding for clerical staff. And so our recommendation is going to be that they either have clerical staff who are not part of the Fort Bragg Police Department, that they're the ones that are assigned access to HMIS, and that those intake forms and exit forms be provided to that staff, or they could outsource it to an existing HMIS provider or partner agency who could do it on their behalf. I know that Hospitality Center has done it in the past. But that's up to the city of Fort Bragg to determine. But we will definitely communicate that the COC has determined that staff through the police department aren't going to be able to do direct entry or access to HMIS.
And I think the other thing we need to be very clear on is in future contracts with jurisdictions that law enforcement is not involved in use agent.
Okay.
Now, do you want to take this back to the full COC or not, Nicholas? I'll call
I was
Nicholas.
just gonna ask if Paul Davis, if you know, like from or Veronica, I don't even, it doesn't matter, but how many of the numbers wise are not being accounted for through the Hospitality Center that are getting counted like through the Fort Bragg Police Department? Like, are we like missing a ton of data because of this, or is it just you know what I mean? Like, are we talking like big issues, or are we talking like?
Let me run the report really quick.
So, crew and their primary mandate is to be doing outreach and connection with local agencies. So, you know, they do that with us a lot. So if somebody's homeless, they encounter them in the field, they've got somebody that's getting arrested a lot. You know, their workers are going to go out and, you know, meet with that person. They have their own, you know, triage and assessment, and that is for them to be able to tell, you know, who here in Fort Bragg can they get them to. You know, I would say if they're homeless, that's probably us, you know, 99% of the time, in which case they're doing our triage. They're getting into HMIS because they're going to our shelter. We're doing coordinated entry with them. We have the wellness center set up in HMIS as well, which does just collect basic data, but at least they're in there, and they're in there for the next contact that they have with the different programs. So I don't think you're missing anything. And I do there is a lot of one-way communication between crew and other agencies, including us. So you know, they don't have a HIPAA mandate. They don't have, you know, any of that. So, but it's been very helpful for them to be able to walk in and say, you know, here's a person, they want to work with you. We would love it if you'd work with them. And here's everything they told us and everything we know about them. That's helpful to us. So, but I agree, they shouldn't, that shouldn't be an automatic two-way conversation. So, and just so you know, crew isn't coming back to us and saying, you know, we want to know everything you know about this person. They certainly do checkups. They're like, how are they doing? And they do sign releases. If they want to work with crew, they sign a release so that we can, you know, talk about some general stuff about them. I'm twitchy about it because our agency, we use HMIS heavily. We use every module in that thing. We're trying to go paperless basically here. So, you know, that's everybody's case notes. That's treatment plans that we're doing with folks, you know, which are coming up and being mandated in our contracts and stuff. So it's like, hey, go look at it anytime you want. So yeah.
And Fort Bragg Police Department has entered into the AB 210 multidisciplinary team agreement. And so they're able to exchange information with any local service provider about someone who is experiencing homelessness, as long as that data exchange furthers their progress towards achieving housing. And so if there's a need to exchange information, it's acceptable. But that level of personally identifying information and their history of services with all homeless service providers, not just the one that they need to communicate with, makes me a little nervous.
Yeah. Well, and they will always have an overriding mandate to investigate and
Right.
prosecute crimes. So,
And that
you know,
includes
unless it
domestic
gives them
violence.
information you didn't want to see,
Mhm.
still seen it, and they have to do something with it. So,
Right. And we don't want that to prevent people from being upfront with us about criminal behavior or abuse that they're experiencing.
Yeah, I think the risk is countered by any benefit.
Yeah. I'm super supportive. I just wanted to make sure we weren't losing like a ton of data by saying, oh no, by the way, kind of thing. That's all. Which I didn't think we were.
so for the first couple of years, I mean, they had HMIS access when they first got the contract, and
Mhm.
nobody in their office wanted to get on there at all. They were just like, we have other things to do. And so we've been the data entry agency for them since its inception. And we just give them the aggregate reports. Here's the number of bed nights and yada yada yada. So and stuff for their billing and whatnot.
And
that's
we can
worked out pretty-
absolutely still provide those reports,
Yeah.
whether it's through the HMIS lead or it's through whomever they contract with. Absolutely, no problem providing reports. Not even, happy to provide names of people who they have served because it needs to match up with their invoice to make sure that, that the people that they paid for a night, and so but I think it really needs to come through the city of Fort Bragg, through their administrative team. Okay, thank you.
Next.
Okay, moving on. Can you guys still see the agenda?
Yep. It's on my
Great.
desk.
You still see it on the computer?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, so those were the two primary topics I wanted to discuss while Paul Davis was here. So I'm just going to go back up to the top and work my way down. I didn't receive any requests for public comment, and I should have included that. Does anyone have any public comment on items not on the agenda? See none. Moving forward. Attached is the data completeness report. I honestly haven't looked at it much. Everything's going well. Does anyone have any questions?
Sorry, I was slow to the draw. I'm over here bouncing up and down, trying to raise my hand and not.
Okay.
Public comment. I just wanted to share, just because from a data standpoint and from housing, the Reentry Collaborative, in partnership with probation, hosted their first kind of reentry event. And I know like Fort Street Project was there. There was a request from the chief of probation that we work on, and I'll be sharing this everywhere, but anyway, that we work on getting more housing providers present, at least connecting them a little bit better to those who are reentering the community. It is constantly a barrier, for them being successful, the participants we serve. And so I just wanted to share that we are doing events. We're looking at hosting more events. I say we as part of the collaborative, but also as Geo Reentry. So if you get me like calling you, you know why. We are trying to bring service providers into our facility as well that help with that. I'm working on connecting. We've worked pretty closely with Ford Street Project so far. CDC I've built connections with, but I'm kind of trying to go through the right channels first, and most of the time it's some kind of emergency thing. So, but I just wanted to share about the reentry event. It was a huge success. There was like 50 to 60 people there. They all came kind of at one moment, and it was great. And then it was slow at first, and then it just kind of picked up. So just kind of a plug for, community involvement that way. But thank you for those who did come. We appreciate it. I'm done. That's all. Sorry.
So on that note, I received an email today through the HUD Exchange mailing list, and I try not to bombard the COC distribution list with too many trainings. So I wasn't sure if I should send this out, but it's called Improving Housing Outcomes for People Involved with the Criminal Justice System. The webinar series covers building effective partnerships with criminal justice system stakeholders, expanding access to housing through outreach, identification, and prioritization, and advancing housing first approach through low barrier housing and supports. And it's targeted for COC housing providers and criminal CJ system stakeholders. So I was thinking about forwarding it to the Reentry Collaborative group. But this is at the national level, and I don't know if we necessarily want to advertise expectations we can't meet.
Well, here's the iron. If you could send it to me, Veronica, I'd be interested in just seeing it. I think I got the same email, but here's the irony from HUD sending that out. Because in HUD's 4560.3, their handbook for affordable housing, they explicitly exclude certain criminal actions and or criminal offenses. Sex offender is one, like right out the gate, no questions asked. So for them to talk housing first and yet have statutorily hard restrictions on certain criminal offenses, it just makes me laugh because they don't get it. I mean, they could talk this all day long, but if they don't fix their standards, how are people going to pay for rent? They can't get a housing choice voucher from the Community Development Commission. They don't qualify. And half the criminal offenses that they're getting evicted from or getting released from would automatically exclude them from 90% of the housing unless it's justice involved. So it's just kind of ironic to me that, that HUD puts this out, yet they have the most restrictive, right along with USDA, the most restrictive restrictions on built-in criminal restrictions that tie, we're looking at doing an AB 109 project with justice involved where I just don't do criminal screening. I'm hesitant to say that just barely because what if the insurance companies come out and go, you can't house this type of individual, too much risk, like who else is going to step in when we try to couple funds that don't have the restriction? But for HUD to say that just kind of makes me chuckle. I see Nick shaking his head, but it just kind of makes me chuckle for the HUD to speak housing first, yet not follow housing first model in anything they put out.
Right. And there's different divisions and departments within HUD. And the COC is under the SNAP's office, which has nothing to do with those or influence at all over the regulations for like housing choice voucher or, the housing subsidies or constructing affordable housing. Like they're completely siloed. And so
That's why
you're right. And so one hand doesn't know what the other's doing. Well, they know, they just can't stop it or change it.
Yeah, this has been my ongoing kind of battle with a lot of my participants is even if I do connect, like they can't get housing because they have the charges that prevent them from getting placed. And that's the biggest barrier that I'm like still fighting. It's an uphill battle. Like it's like, okay, well, what do we do? So I think that having all the information and knowing how to connect and knowing what's needed and all that stuff is great. But like, what's it gonna do? I'd love to have the information, Veronica. So if you would share it, I'll gladly attend and try to listen and see.
Okay.
With hopes that maybe someday it will change.
I just forwarded to Dan and I'll send to you as well, Nick. And you guys let me know if you think I should send it out.
Okay, appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay, so that was under public comment. Any feedback on data completeness reports?
I think it looks pretty good.
Thank you.
It was the same as last month.
pretty much. Local HMIS trainings. Our team just completed a training recently with Brittany. Amy, help me out here. Who was it with?
Kelly. Kelly.
Uh-oh, I think I'm having internet issues.
With Kelly.
Oh, no, one on end user. Oh, is that what we're talking? No, not with Kelly. No, the end user training that you and Aya provided to,
We did one with Sherwood.
yes, Sherwood Valley Band of Pomo Indians.
Yes.
Brittany is, I believe, is her name. Recently was trained. So, and we're in ongoing support with Northern Circle Indian Housing Authority for their programs. And we just received a request from the Caddo tribe for 3 of their staff to gain access to HMIS. There's a lot of programs through the California Department of Social Services, like Bringing Families Home, and HDAP, which is the Homeless Disabled Advocacy Program, and that's ran through our Bridge unit. Those funding sources require use of HMIS, and so those tribal allocations under those same programs aren't required to use HMIS, but they can. And so Caddo would like to, and so we're supporting them. We just got the end user requests, and so we're going to be scheduling training and setting up more programs, but really wanted to share that our tribal partners are really expanding their use of HMIS, and it's been really great, and they're really engaged.
And
yeah,
we do have another upcoming training. I believe it's July 3rd, and we already have at least one person from Fort Street who's going to be joining us.
And if any providers need ongoing support, additional training, just reach out to us and let us know, and we'll schedule stuff on with you, as you know, based on your availability. Okay, we did meeting frequency and the recommended action. Hybrid PSH and voucher programs introduction. So we had 2 errors that we could not resolve on our last LSA. And these 2 errors were related to duplications of tenants in permanent housing. This is an example is when a person receives a permanent supportive housing certificate from CDC, which is recorded in HMIS, and then that person uses that voucher at a housing complex such as Oak Creek Commons 2, which is also in HMIS. So if both those programs record the same person, that person is now counted as 2 instead of 1. And so that caused a couple of errors in our LSA. And so we've been working back with HUD. We had resolved this issue previously under with the Willow Terrace program. When we had a PSH tenant move in there, we had to figure out what to do. And so we had created a hybrid project, but it hadn't come up in a very long time. And so when folks started using PSH certificates at Live Oak or at Oak Creek Commons or the Plateau, in those units that are also in HMIS, we had to figure out what to do. And so the solution that we've come up with, and HUD doesn't really have an answer, and we came up with a solution and they're like, okay, yeah, do that. So it's not like this is direction from HUD. This is what we have figured out that HUD has given their blessing on. And that is to create a hybrid project for those clients that have a voucher and are in a physical unit that's in HMIS. I do believe we're going to put permission for CDC staff because they're the common link, because it's anytime that a voucher is issued by CDC for someone that lives in one of these complexes. And instead of training staff with RCHDC and Plateau on when to know, yes, we're cross-training, but the primary responsibility and data is going to live with CDC.
Veronica, let me ask you a question, because I know, for example, in OC2 and Plateau, there's only a portion of the units there that are in HMIS. So
right,
that puts some of the tenants in the hybrid and some of the tenants in just their CDC standard permanent supportive housing units. I see Shauna shaking her head, so I assume that's.
So like at the Plateau, it's anytime a PSH or an EHV, and that's really what caused the error. Was we had an error under PSH clients, and then we had an error under EHV clients. And so because it's both programs, we have to change the project setup, like based upon, how many units are in each one, based upon how many clients have a certificate. So like right now, there's one tenant that lives at Willow Terrace that has a PSH. I think there might be 0, but I believe there's 1. And so instead of having 37 units, it has 36 units. And then that one project has 1 unit because it's only one client.
And that's fine, because Willow Terrace would be there was intended to be 37 altogether, right?
Right.
Let's say at Plateau and OC2 in particular, there's a limited number that actually fall under HMIS coordination, right? So, they could end up with tenants at the same facility, some on their normal permanent supportive housing list and some on their hybrid list, because you only have 19 at OC2 that are dictated by HMIS. They don't move. They're always the same 19 units. So
right. And so it's just anyone that moves into those 19 units. And so anytime someone moves into one of those complexes, we should discuss it at Housing Mendo and work out who's going to do the data entry and making sure that everyone, RCHDC staff or Plateau, or I guess whoever's in charge of Plateau and CDC staff all know how to run their reports.
I think we only have one entry person, correct?
Yeah, right. Well, yes, but sometimes there's access by
third parties.
Anchor Health staff.
Oh yeah.
Like Whitney.
Yeah. Because we only do the housing side of it, we can't do the clinician side of it.
Right. And so both of you have to have access to it.
Yeah.
And so that works pretty well with most of those projects. But once in a blue moon, there's those people that move in with CDC assistance, and we haven't run into any issues where someone couldn't access what they needed to for those projects. But we set up Willow Terrace a long time ago, and I can't guarantee that these future projects are going to have that same perfect setup. And so we're going to have to play with it.
Well, no, I can tell you, I can't speak to 100%, but I'm pretty 98% positive that any future ones are all going to be blended. There's not going to be another Willow Terrace where it's 100% permanent supportive qualified applicants. It just is physically impossible to fund that.
Right. Right. And so it's going to be CDC staff working with property management staff to
Yeah.
make sure we
There's gonna be a
know,
blend.
is this an HMIS recorded unit? If yes, let's work out who's going to do it and make sure that when we all do our reports, we include both projects, not just your
I
one.
think it would be good to just, I mean, well, I can't speak for how the plateaus run, but I know RCHDC could provide unit numbers at OC2 that would be like, these are your HMIS units, because we know what they are. We don't move them around. They're set. They're
If
the
you
same
have that, we can absolutely record that in
Yeah.
HMIS so that it can be easily referenced.
They're
And
the same 19 units all the time.
okay.
Unless somebody like excels greatly and stays in the unit and no longer qualifies for the No Place Like Home or HEAT program, but that has not been the case yet. So I'll send that to you, Veronica and Shauna.
Perfect. Thank you.
So it's kind of, the plateau will have one as well, because we have, it's strange because we have our PBV units at the plateau that we fill with the homeless tab. So that I'm assuming those 19 need to be in HMIS.
They
Now,
are.
what about the ones that are PSH units that are for like MCHC or something like that? Are those in there for them as well, or is that completely like separate?
What do you mean PSH for MCHC?
I thought they said there were like some PSH units in there. Like there's the senior housing, the family units.
Right.
There's like a little section that's for like permanent supportive housing that the staff at MCHC kind of help.
Those are the same 19 units.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure.
Yep.
Well,
Those are the
perfect.
same ones. So do you know the addresses for those 19 units, Shanna?
Yes, it's the 500 Kempe one.
Will you send that to me? Will you email that to me? Like that way you can look it up and make sure that, you got it right.
There's 20 in that address area, but the one unit is a manager's unit. So
Great.
I believe it's 1 through 19, but I'll check the files when we're done here. I'll check the ledger.
Thank you. And then we can record that in HMIS. And then in the future, whenever it's okay, somebody has moved in to Plateau with a PSH, we can look up, is this address one of the 19? And and that way we don't have to ask you or Plateau staff every time we're wondering what we should do. Like,
would that be the same with like our Walnut units? Because because
they're not in HMIS.
Okay, I was gonna say we have PSH clients that go in there, but they're not part, like we don't pull like the Plateau,
right. It's only whenever a voucher or certificate is used in a unit that's also in HMIS.
Perfect.
The Walnut's not in HMIS, so that client is only in there once.
Definitely gonna need a list so that I can start doing things properly.
That's exactly what I want to do, is create a list and put it in HMIS so it's very clear to everyone.
I asked Sarah, I was like, were you aware of because I haven't moved anyone into Willow Terrace yet. I know I've exited people, but I'm like, were you aware there was a separate thing? Because I'm clueless at this point. I was like, but I want to do it right. So
it was really front loaded, Shanna. It was like really, really front loaded on PSH over there. And then pretty much everybody else that's moved in since then is a standard voucher of some sort.
Yeah, I think I moved like my last PSH client out. Like it was supposed to be an eviction, but he left. So it was pretty like straightforward.
Yeah.
Okay. Wanted to introduce that idea. This is what we're working on. And bear with us as we work out the kinks. And if you encounter any issues as we go along, let us know. We want to fix it. We had our law enforcement discussion, so there's only one last item. And I wanted to give an update on our 2024 HIC and PIT executive report. We have a draft that Megan and I are working on revising. I have one last piece of information to research, and that is in how we reference the tribal partners who've worked with us in a contextual paragraph. And so I just want to make sure that I run it by a few folks so it's culturally appropriate. And then ASR was still working on developing some of the more advanced data outcomes that weren't just like in the report, like we had to actually process the data. One of the things that is in our preliminary findings, and I haven't been able to double check this with ASR yet, and so take this with a grain of salt, but our inland north numbers jumped. They increased, and I think we expected that with the addition of Round Valley. The census tracts changed. I think it was in 2022. And so when we did our 2023, the system hadn't been updated to reflect the new census tracts. So when we did it this year, one of the big tracts in the inland north coastal changed, and it caused both Laytonville and Leggett to be moved to the coastal region. So when I share this, know Laytonville and Leggett, and that includes the Caddo tribe, were included in the coastal numbers. Let me see if I can pull this up.
So then inland north is Round Valley, Willits, basically.
Anything north of Redwood Valley, excluding Redwood Valley, basically it's Yuva Drive north.
Right.
And then it goes west. It used to go to basically just to the other side of 101, but now the coast includes the 101 corridor. So it's kind of hard to describe.
Yeah, but that's okay.
But the report will have images of it.
And you're saying the numbers still increased even with
Yes.
with Laytonville and Leggett being moved over.
Yes. And even though I've been logged into this computer for 3 hours without having it restarted, I still can't access the shared drive. So I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it was like 35% was on the coast. And then the remaining balance was split exactly half and half between inland north and inland coast at 215.5 people. And the 0.5 came from allocating 1.75 persons per RV. And so the way that the math worked out. But it was, to the exact, it was an exact split between inland north and inland south. And so that was pretty shocking to me.
That's a statistical anomaly.
It was very odd. It was definitely an anomaly. So like I said, this is just my preliminary numbers. This is just what I found using the raw data. And I still have to verify all of that. And that'll all be in our executive report once it's ready to be published. We're not going to make it before our next COC meeting, but I'm really hoping that we'll have it for our July meeting. Any questions? Our next meeting will be on Thursday, July 11th at 2 p.m. That is the same day as the reentry meeting that starts at 1:30. So I'll only be able to catch the first half of that meeting. Just as a little plug. Anything else?
And I think it's at the Donovan room now too. It's still Zoom, but it's at the Donovan room instead of at Public Health. Just so you know. Yeah.